Houston is often hailed as one of the most attractive cities to live in the United States. As one of the country's fastest-growing metropolitan areas, it offers a lower cost of living compared to other major cities, abundant job opportunities, and a vibrant entertainment scene. From world-class museums to diverse culinary options, Houston has plenty to offer its residents, making it an appealing place to call home. However, while Houston is frequently described as a great place to live, it also faces significant challenges when it comes to crime. Despite its many advantages, Houston ranks as the 10th most dangerous city in the U.S., out of hundreds of cities nationwide. The city struggles with a high rate of violent crime, with an incidence rate of 11.35 violent crimes per 1,000 residents. This means that while many neighborhoods in Houston offer safety and comfort, certain areas remain troubled by persistent violence. One such area is Sunnyside, a predominantly African-American community located just south of downtown Houston. With a population of over 17,000, Sunnyside has become notorious for its high crime rates, which have continued to rise in recent years. In fact, Sunnyside has one of the highest crime rates in Houston, with 92 crimes per 1,000 residents. This means that the chances of becoming a victim of crime in this neighborhood are roughly 1 in 11. The most common violent crimes in Sunnyside include robbery, assault, and, to a lesser extent, homicide. Much of the crime in Sunnyside and Houston as a whole is driven by gang activity. Organized gangs operate not only in lower-income neighborhoods, but also extend their reach into affluent suburbs and small towns. In Houston, gangs have a pervasive presence, even infiltrating local schools. According to reports, more than a dozen gangs are actively operating in the city, making it a hub for criminal networks. What makes the gang problem in Houston particularly concerning is how these groups have adapted to modern technology. Gangs like Tango Blast, Texas Mexican Mafia, Mississippi 13, and Barrio Azteca have increasingly turned to social media and websites to recruit new members, making it easier for them to grow their influence. These gangs are heavily involved in illegal activities, including drug trafficking, human smuggling, violent crimes, and sex trafficking, further entrenching their control over certain parts of the city. Houston's position as a major port city and transportation hub has tragically made it one of the leading cities for human trafficking in the United States. It is often said that Houston has more brothels than Starbucks locations, a stark reflection of the deep-rooted issue. A quick internet search reveals that Houston consistently ranks at the top for human trafficking cases in the U.S. Recent data indicates that more than 300,000 people in Texas have been victims of human trafficking, with at least 80,000 of those being minors, forced into sexual exploitation. Many of the victims trafficked through Houston come from regions such as Asia, Central America, and Mexico. Traffickers use a range of tactics to ensnare their victims, from physical violence to psychological manipulation, often luring young boys and girls with false promises of a better life or through feigned romantic relationships. One of the city's most notorious locations for prostitution rings is the intersection of Bissonnet and Beechnut near Beltway 8, where illegal sex trafficking activity is rampant. Why is Houston such a hotspot for human trafficking? The reasons are multifaceted. First, its proximity to the Mexican border makes it a key entry point for trafficked individuals coming into the U.S. Additionally, Houston's thriving industries, especially in energy, medicine, and its role as host to major conventions and sporting events, create a lucrative environment for those involved in the illegal sex trade. The simple reality is that wherever large numbers of men with disposable income gather, the demand for commercial sex and trafficking increases. Law enforcement has made significant strides in dismantling trafficking networks in the city. One prominent case involved Larry Lewis, who was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison for sex trafficking and transporting multiple women across state lines to engage in prostitution. Despite such successes, the fight against human trafficking in Houston remains ongoing and complex. Another significant challenge that Houston faces is its vulnerability to extreme weather, making it one of the most disaster-prone cities in the United States. A survey revealed that around 57% of Houston residents have considered relocating, largely due to the area's frequent exposure to severe weather events. For Houstonians, emergencies have become an almost routine part of life. The city has been battered by a series of devastating storms over the years. In 2008, Hurricane Ike caused widespread destruction, and in 2017, Hurricane Harvey brought unprecedented flooding to the region, displacing thousands of residents. More recently, Houston experienced a crippling winter storm in 2021, and in July 2024, Hurricane Beryl struck the area, causing widespread suffering. The storm not only knocked out power for days, leaving many without electricity or air conditioning during a heat wave, but also underscored the city's broader infrastructure vulnerabilities. Flooding remains Houston's #1 natural disaster threat. The city's geography, characterized by flat terrain and slow-moving waterways, makes it particularly prone to floods. When heavy rain or storms hit, the city's drainage systems struggle to cope, often resulting in large-scale flooding that can destroy homes and disrupt daily life for months. Climate change is exacerbating these challenges. Both hurricanes and heat waves are becoming more intense and frequent, putting additional pressure on the city's poorest and most vulnerable communities. The long-term effects of natural disasters go beyond immediate devastation. They contribute to a broader housing crisis, as affordable homes are often the first to be damaged or destroyed, leaving many residents struggling to find secure and safe housing in the aftermath. One of the most frustrating aspects of living in Houston is its notorious traffic congestion. On average, Houston drivers lose 62 hours a year stuck in traffic. The city's congestion rate is about 20%, meaning commute times during peak traffic hours are 20% longer than in free-flowing conditions. So where is traffic the worst? The West Loop stands out as the most congested stretch of highway in Texas. But it's not just the West Loop. Houston is home to 10 of the 14 worst truck traffic bottlenecks in the state, and this problem is only getting worse each year. Recent data shows Houston has dropped to the 8th worst city for traffic congestion in the US, down from its previous rank of 9th. The impact of this congestion extends far beyond inconvenience. Houston is among the cities where residents spend some of the most on fuel, with an average of over $1,000 annually per person. But the economic toll goes beyond fuel costs. Traffic congestion also affects productivity and reduces the overall quality of life, as people spend precious hours idling in their cars instead of being productive or enjoying personal time. Moreover, traffic congestion in Houston isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. The city experiences a high number of fatal car accidents per 100,000 residents, adding another layer of anxiety for drivers who traverse the busy highways each day. Despite its traffic woes, Houston's cost of living is relatively affordable, especially when compared to other large metropolitan areas. Houston boasts the third lowest cost of living among the most populous metro areas in the US. On average, the cost of living in Houston is 5.9% below the national average, which is particularly appealing for those seeking big city amenities at a lower price. Housing, in particular, is a bright spot for affordability. The cost of housing in Houston is nearly 15% lower than the national average, making homeownership or renting more accessible than in many other major cities. However, homelessness remains a persistent challenge. although Houston has successfully reduced its homeless population by more than half, largely by enforcing strict rules against setting up tents in public spaces and by offering subsidized housing, the issue persists. The city allocates approximately $50 million annually to build housing for the homeless, but this funding is widely considered insufficient. Without an increase in resources, the progress made in reducing homelessness by as much as 60% could be undone in the coming years, leading to a potential resurgence of people living on the streets. Racial inequality, particularly in housing, also continues to be a significant issue in Houston. For years, systemic racism has limited access to affordable housing for communities of color. Black and Latino residents often have fewer opportunities to secure affordable homes than their white counterparts. This is a critical issue in a city where racial and economic disparities intersect in various ways. One of the most glaring examples of racial injustice in Houston is environmental racism, where communities of color are disproportionately affected by environmental hazards. Many industrial sites and toxic waste facilities have been deliberately placed in neighborhoods predominantly inhabited by Black and Latino residents. This leads to a higher exposure to pollutants and greater health risks for these communities, all while they have limited access to healthcare and other essential services. The effects of this environmental racism are compounded by other forms of inequality. Communities of color in Houston often face restricted access to education, employment opportunities, and public transportation. This lack of resources further entrenches the disparities, making it harder for these communities to overcome the challenges they face.